Now I want you guys to hear me out here. When I made the last video, I got the impression that some people weren't really listening to me and were just annoyed that I was saying Other M was crap. But today, just forget about that. Let's put to one side the fact that the game isn't good and just analyze the game design at work here. Who knows, you may even learn a couple things. So let's get something straight here, guys. Even if Other M told the most riveting, heartfelt, well-written tale ever penned into a script, it still wouldn't have worked. Because the gameplay is completely devoid of most of the exploration elements that the series has been building up to over the years. Well, yeah, there's that, but also because this kind of narrative really doesn't work for Metroid. Let me explain. If there's one word I would use to describe Metroid, it's discovery. It's about exploring planets, traversing the unknown, going through the remains of long-lost alien civilizations. On the way, of course, you get to hunt down all those juicy collectibles the series is known for. Now, Metroid Prime was the first game to really introduce an ongoing story to the series, by which I mean it was the first title in the series to have a narrative that played out through the entire game instead of just at the start and the end, and it came up with a great way to do it. You could scan optional terminals and devices, piecing together the events that transpired on the planet yourself. In other words, it made the story its own collectible. You uncover the narrative the same way you hunt down all the power-ups and pieces of equipment. So in the same way you feel like you're accomplishing something when you collect an item striving to create the ultimate power suit, you get the same buzz when you discover a piece of the story in your attempt to discover what's been going on. Finding out how the pirates are reacting to the situation as the events of the game transpire isn't just rewarding in itself, but also enjoyable simply because what is written is fun to read. This isn't just restricted to scanning though. Environmental details also contribute to this, dead bodies, the condition of certain structures, etc. Other M does none of this. It puts the full narrative together for you. The player no longer constructs the plot, the narrating Samus in the story does. You see, what felt so great about the Prime games was that you and Samus Aran felt like one entity. One must ask if it's even possible to explore the protagonist's backstory at all while still keeping the player as one with Samus. At least not in this manner. You see, prior to Other M, we already knew a fair amount about Samus's past, but what she felt about it herself, that we didn't know. And honestly, it was more interesting that way. What does go through this woman's mind? Wanting that question answered is always going to convey a more satisfying narrative experience than actually knowing. But wait, Gaming Brit, Prime 3 has tons of cutscenes and characters who natter onto you and you love that game. Well kids, there are two big differences there. One, Samus doesn't contribute narratively to the plot herself in any way apart from the actions the player partakes in. What I mean by this is that since we're simply spectating the events that take place in these cutscenes the same way Samus is, they become just another part of the world we get to see. None of it changes what we the player would do in the situations that occur. The same way we interact with a panel on a door in Prime 1 and 2 because it's there, it's the same reason we have to talk to Rundus at a couple of points, because he's part of the environment that we're traversing. 2. Most of the cutscenes are there for aesthetical purposes. The real bulk of the plot is still found in the logs you can scan and the environmental details you uncover. I think one of the morals we can extrapolate from the missteps of Other M is that showing is better than telling in a lot of cases. Let's take Prime 2 for example, a game that really stepped up the plot elements from Prime 1 and compare some of the narrative moments within. Specifically, the relationship between Samus and Dark Samus. A lot of conflict residing in these characters is told solely through body language in this game. The way Samus strides into places with her power suit gives her a menacing feel. You get the sense that the giant piece of armor she has on her actually carries some weight. The one in Other M looks awkward in almost every scene it's in. Samus just looks kind of out of place. She stands around really awkwardly with no real gravitas to her stance. In Prime 2 you can see just by looking at her why the pirates are afraid of her presence. The way she looks around each area she enters makes you feel like the person in the suit is calculating her every move. As for Dark Samus, the first time you meet her there's no need for dialogue explaining what's going on. You can tell by the way she moves and tilts her head that whoever Dark Samus is, she's animalistic yet also slightly calculating. There was no need for something like this.
Some creatures use the powers of others to capture their prey. Watching this disgusting beast, I felt as though it was feeding off my power as well.
Take this scene as well. Samus enters a room and sees Dark Samus easily vanquish a group of space pirates as she moves over to harvest some Phazon or whatever. Thanks to the fact that you remain in control of Samus throughout this scene and it isn't a cutscene allows it to convey a plethora of things at once. Since you have come across this seemingly random event, you feel a sensation of discovery. Because you see another entity in the game dispatch space pirates in a similar fashion to you, you feel empowered, as if to say someone else is as cool as me on the block. However, at the same time, you feel disempowered. Since you are still in control of Samus, you are thus vulnerable to Dark Samus. Something else apart from you can affect the environment and the characters within in a significant fashion without you being able to do anything about it, yet you don't feel cheated since you're still technically in control. This whole scene would have lost its entire purpose if it had been presented as a non-playable movie. This goes back to what I was saying earlier about the player and Samus being one entity. The feelings you have here are very similar to the ones the theoretical Samus would be having. Shit like this, where the player knows something that Samus doesn't, creates a clear disconnect from the player and the world you're supposedly getting to explore. When you get outsmarted or attacked in Prime, it's you that's getting outsmarted or attacked. When this happens in Other M, since there are so many cutscenes, it's not you it's happening to, but the Samus within the story. I won't spoil it, but a lot of similar things happen in the ending. The way you and Dark Samus confront each other in the final showdown, or how Samus bids farewell to those she has saved. The way she leaves without so much as a word is very powerful. While you know what was just accomplished was monumental, the way Samus leaves gives you an overwhelming feeling of satisfaction. As if the game is saying, yeah, we just did that. It's these kind of cases where less is so much more. The kind of moment no drawn out monologue can compare to, because it's the moment where you as a player take in the fact that you have accomplished something grand. You may think that the people who made the game didn't really have to put much effort into conveying these things narrative-wise, but who cares if it was hard to do or not? It's effective. It's the kind of thing you don't get in modern games these days, because, well, this is a whole other can of worms, but a lot of modern games desperately try to be movies. They strive to be described as cinematic. Other M was a game that tried to do that, and well, it was a worse title because of it. Now, I mentioned in my previous video that Other M lifted way too many assets from previous titles in the series. Something I like about games like Prime 2 is that the environments, characters, and game world as a whole are mostly 100% new. Even the design of characters from previous games, like the Space Pirates, differ from title to title. They even serve a new purpose narrative-wise to demonstrate the power of the Ing and how easily they are dispatched and possessed by them. In other words, they essentially become the bitches of the game, meaning at least they're filling in a different role this time around. But I'm getting off track here. The point is, the elements that compose titles like Prime 2 have to stand up on their own. They can't rely on previous games in the franchise to do all the work for them. They can't make a boss interesting by just plucking it from an older title to wet fanboy pants. Creating memorable moments that don't rely on nostalgia is a lot harder to do. It means not being extremely lazy, for example. I guess what I find sublimely ironic is how before Prime 1 was released, people expected it just to be a generic action game with a bunch of Metroid characters thrown in. Instead, it replicated the Metroidvania style perfectly, adding in mostly new characters and environments without rehashing all the previous locations and enemies. Then Other M comes out using all the old enemies, powers, and locations that the retro purists love so much, yet it fucks up the Metroid formula by making it a dumbed-down action game with barely any exploration. Now let's talk a little about exploration, because a lot of it doesn't just come down to how complex it is, or whether or not you have a condescending map that tells you where to go the second you finish doing something. It also has to do with structure. You see, all your objectives in Other M are kind of random. From fairly early on in the Prime games, you have a clear sense of what you're supposed to be doing, so you mark yourself a clear goal that must be accomplished. This doesn't just make the Prime games more cohesive, but giving you a huge quest up front really makes it feel like you did something impressive at the end by overcoming the odds. Let's take Prime 2 again, for example. After about half an hour of game time, your objective is clear. Restore light to the main 3 areas of the planet, kill the source of the Ing. You achieve the salvation of an entire alien civilization and the restoration of an entire planet from the clutches of 3 different enemy intelligences. Now tell me, what was the objective in Other M? Find out what's going on, I guess. What is accomplished at the end of Other M? Some experiments in a spaceship nobody knew about were destroyed. Damn, better break out the bubbly for that epic accomplishment. Should all games be structured like Prime 2? Certainly not, but for Metroidvania, a genre which is essentially do a bunch of small things that lead up to a big thing, it fits well, making the player feel like a badass with an objective instead of some clueless detective who wanders through the world getting outsmarted by shitty conspiracies. When you come to the realization of what you have to do, the weight of the task at hand is rather intoxicating. Think about it like this. As Samus, you have an agenda in Prime. Just like everyone else in the game, you're doing something for a reason. Makes you feel like Samus may be competent or something, I don't know. And if you say that doing it like Prime 2 means there's no mystery to be had, or you prefer hackneyed video game plot intrigue to an actual feel of accomplishment when completing an impressive gaming feat, then I'm sorry, but you're a bit of a closed-minded idiot. You can have mystery in games like Prime, you can have discovery too, because unlike other M, games like Prime 3 for example are big and can have you discover the mysteries behind individual locations while still offering a larger goal to complete. The point is, when you complete all the objectives, seeing the beautiful detailed game world in the process, and you get this kind of final cutscene, it's the kind of sensation that no cliched Hollywood-style movie clip can compare to. A combination of your efforts as the player and the story's way of giving you a pat on the back. I do hear complaints from time to time that Prime 2's random scavenger hunt before the final boss is just artificial lengthening, and while that may be true to some degree, I think it still serves a good purpose. Your goal is taken just out of reach, just before you think you're about to get there. This made me, at least, even more determined to beat the game, though I can see why some might find it annoying. It was done a lot better in Prime 3 because while there was a scavenger hunt that needed to be completed before the end of the game, it wasn't withheld from you until just before you were sent off to the climax and could be completed bit by bit as you progressed through the title. Music, what about music? Well, I've always thought Prime has some extremely good video tunes going down, because while the tracks serve as great complements to the atmosphere, they can be by themselves badass pieces of music. The sort of thing you get from a lot of retro tunes, in fact. Oh sure, you get a lot of remixes from previous Metroid tracks, but at the same time you have a huge amount of original tracks, which in some cases rival some of the classic tunes. Now tell me, can you remember a single original track from Other M? Oh, but wait, there's that cheesy piano thing that plays on the title screen after beating the game. Oh, give me a break. You could put that generic melody on any title screen and it would fit. Now listen to the beat of the almost alien-like sounding music from Prime's title screen. You see, it fits the mood, it's memorable, it gets you pumped for the game, and also feels a bit emotional at points. You know what's funny? There will still be people out there that don't give two craps about anything I've just said, because at the end of the day, they just prefer Other M because it looks like Super Metroid. Hey, I'm not projecting here, I've seen this kind of shit go down. It seems some people don't care if you put actual creativity into creating a new and interesting environment, just rehash the one people saw as a kid and they'll be shitting to the moon. Or shitting to ZBs in this case. Maybe this is a good time to bring up the fact that while Super Metroid is a very, very good game, it isn't the be-all and end-all of Metroid. More interesting things have been done with Metroid that a 2D game like Super Metroid could never do, even if it's one of the most atmospheric 2D games ever made.
That seems inefficient.
Holy cow, have I been going on for that long? And I thought this would be just a short little epilogue to my previous vid. Oh well. You know, some people are stubborn. There are people out there who will never be convinced that Prime is a great example of game design in regards to Metroidvania, while Other M is most definitely not. If you're one of those people who passed on the Prime games because they looked too different to you for some silly, shallow reason, give them a try, open your mind, leave your comfort zone. Has the Metroid series been irrevocably tarnished by Other M? Yeah, perhaps. But do you know what? At least I was here to tell you why.